Evolution, a Theory in Crisis. So that's the third best piece of news I've ever heard, is that evolution is a theory in crisis. The first, of course, was the gospel. That's the best news I've ever heard. The second one was, so my wife Keisha said, I do, and I was like, phew. So this is the third best news I've ever heard. I want to welcome Dr. Thomas Woodward.
Now, I'm under pressure to begin with a little bit of a rap, but I will leave that to the Q&A. I'm still working on it, okay? So what I want to do today and what we're going to just launch into is kind of a quick, it's almost like going up to Epcot. You know, when you go into one of those rides, it's educational, and you see an image of this and a moving animatronic sculpture of that. And so we're going to see a lot of images. We're going to try to just move quickly through some of these issues that come up when you talk about evolution. Evolution is like a no-brainer topic in apologetics. Why? Because it remains a barrier on that road to faith for many people. It was for me personally. When I found out that there were students studying Genesis, that didn't really ruffle my feathers as a freshman. It was first semester, 1968. And then when I found that this group, the Princeton Evangelical Fellowship, was presenting scientific evidence against evolution, I said, that's a bridge too far. That's crazy. And I know I confronted, in a nice, I hope a nice, gentlemanly way, the students. I wound up going to one of their meetings to meet and basically to try to refute the leader of the group. That was kind of, hubris 101, okay? And I actually wound up getting in a conversation, and that was the first time I heard a clear presentation of the good news of Christ, of the good news of the Messiah. So that's kind of maybe a second story I can come back to, but the idea that we have in the C.S. Lewis Society, again, is to engage those of non-faith and even anti-faith. Now, non-faith, some people have never really heard, they've probably heard a caricature of the Christian faith, a weird, exaggerated, distorted picture. And what they want to hear, they need to hear, is the truth. That's why I was explaining apologetics as explaining and then vindicating or defending the Christian faith. And I think we need to do sometimes more and a better job, do more of our work and do a better job at explaining. And then we have less of a job in the vindicating or defending. So, with that said, I want to just really quickly and make sure everything is working beautifully. Yeah, okay, it is. That's my favorite galaxy. I mean, second favorite. Milky Way is my favorite galaxy since that's where we are. Okay, it's kind of hard to take a picture of the Milky Way galaxy. Why is that? We're in it, that's right. So I can imagine like a mall picture, a diagram of the Milky Way, you are here. Wouldn't that be cool? I've actually seen some astronomers try to do that. And we're right between two arms. There's like a perfect positioning, so that we actually have, it's like having the ultimate skybox up at Raymond James Stadium. So, but this is the Sombrero Galaxy. You like that? Good name, huh? It does look Okay, so why does the Sombrero Galaxy fascinate us? It's beautiful. So there's a level at which the universe, from the large scale down to the tiniest scale, attracts our attention and looks gorgeous. I mean, I have several books that are just beautiful pictures, many of them in large pictures like this big, of galaxies, star clusters, nebula, planets. It's just awe-inspiring. And yet the physics behind the Sombrero Galaxy is amazing. The fine-tuning of the forces that enable that galaxy to hold together. And this is all since 1980. So I graduated in 72 from college, graduated, again, Darrell Bach and I had the privilege of attending with a bunch of other interesting people for 4 years, got the THM 79. A year, can't think of this, Darrell. A year after we graduated was the first paper on the fine-tuning of the universe. That's how recent it is. Well, it's ancient to us sometimes. But that's when the fine-tuning argument really began to roar to life. This is a new argument, and it has actually compelled many, even though some who hesitate to go with the critique of Darwin, Francis Collins himself, the head of the Human Genome Project, has endorsed strongly the argument from design of the whole universe. So, what about Scripture? Now, Scripture has a take on this, and of course we could go to Genesis. I like to go to Zechariah 12:1. Zechariah 12:1 is probably the most unsung creation summary in the whole Bible, at least the Old Testament. Okay, we could go to Romans 1:20, fantastic verse, we should all memorize that. But Zechariah 12, by the way, that's the cartwheel galaxy. I just thought I'd identify these little places as we go on our journey. Pretty well named, I'd say. So, the Lord is speaking, who stretches out the heavens, who lays the foundation of the earth, and who forms the spirit of man within him. And then he launches into this wonderful discourse, this prophecy, Zechariah 12, 13, 14. So the beginning of that discourse is marked with, this is who's speaking, guys. Notice that the stretching out of the galaxies and the universe is mentioned. That's very interesting because this is a phenomenon just discovered in the 20th century. Zechariah, written 480 BC. 3 times in Isaiah this is mentioned. So the Bible had it at least 25 to 2,800 years earlier, that is before science caught up and discovered the phenomenon of the stretching of the cosmos. So that's really interesting, but a lot of people say, I don't have any place for the Bible. Who cares about the Bible? Well, the Bible is what I love to teach along with science and apologetics and C.S. Lewis at Trinity College, but the Bible is one of 2 books that God has. It is the book of Scripture, the most important book, and then there's the book of nature. So what we're doing is we're taking that plunge into the book of nature to see if it really maybe does support design and casts a shadow, a doubt, even a crisis-sized doubt on Darwin's classic theory that we're taught in public schools. So I like to use the idea of a shock. So this is actually a C.S. Lewis responding to the BBC when they contacted him and said, would you come on the radio? James Welch had read his book, Problem of Pain. He loved it. It just knocked him flat practically. And he said, I found my man. We wanted a lay person to come on the radio to talk about the Christian faith. So he said, would you come and talk about either a Christian perspective on literature or your faith? He said, I'm not interested in literature because he didn't want to really talk about modern literature, didn't think much of modern literature. But he said, I would love to talk about my faith. But this is what he said. What I mainly want to talk about is objective right and wrong. The moral argument brought up by Greg yesterday. We heard a fantastic summary of that. Lewis continues in this letter to James Welch. The first step is to create or recover a sense of guilt. Hence, if I give a series of talks, I should mention Christianity only at the end. And I'm snipping the key parts of the letter. Some title like The Art of Being Shocked or These Humans would suit me. Isn't that cool? I love that phrase, the art of being shocked. And I've actually developed a whole talk on this, going off in different directions, because Lewis recurrently, over again and again and again in his writings, would use phrases like stunned, startled, shocked. And it's interesting to see where he uses those phrases. And so I think we could actually, in a way, capture the rhetorical, the strategy, the wisdom of Lewis, and we can use it if we are interested in sharing, maybe awakening people to the fantastic evidence for a designed universe. And so I'd like to think of some of the shocks, not just in the evidence, but even people that are going public with their doubts. Yes, public with their doubts about Darwin, who are not Christians, who do not even believe in God. So let's go ahead and see if we can find some of these shocks. Here's a shock that I had when I was in 2006, 7, and 8, doing a lot of lecturing in Europe. And in Kharkov, Ukraine, I went to the Culinary Institute of Kharkov. Actually, no, that's not the Culinary Institute. It's the first year medical class. But it looks like the Culinary Institute, okay? So I like to think of it as well-dressed, and I said, do you have to do this throughout? Dr. Gill, isn't that amazing? Did you have to dress that way in medical school? I didn't think so. So, and then I said to 2 of the people on the front row, can I take your picture? And they beamed their Ukrainian smile, and yes, we're happy to be in medical school. But as I spoke on the origin of life issue, guess what? We interposed about 10 minutes of this fantastic video called Unlocking the Mystery of Life. How many of you have seen Unlocking the Mystery of Life? Yes, a scattering. Is it great? It's fantastic. It's the whole beginning of the whole series by Illustra Media. If you want to become a $1, $5, $1,000 apologist, you've got to start somewhere, and you got to start with having read, or rather watched, Unlocking the Mystery of Life, The Privileged Planet, Darwin's Dilemma. These are fantastic films. And I know that I think Greg's table has been sharing some of these. We have some of them. So what I did is the Russian dub of that film was in our hands, so we put just the part where it goes into the nucleus and is showing all the molecular machinery. And then I got back up on the stage, and there was a shouting match. All of a sudden, the students were shouting, and the professor stood up, and she shouted back. I said, "What's going on?" to my translator. She says, "I think the students are objecting. They want to see the rest of the movie." So I said, "That's cool." And I said, "What is she saying?" She says, be calm. I'll show you the whole movie next week." So the entire first year medical class got to see the entire 1-hour documentary in Russian, Unlocking the Mystery of Life. I think that's cool. Yes, that's a work of a sovereign creator God. So I got it back there with my little DNA models and my protein strings and had a lot of fun, showing the difficulty of assembling even a single one of these molecules by random jostling and holding hands of the constituent building blocks. Just about a year later, I was able to, Bill Dembski couldn't fly to Rome, but there was a free ticket to Rome, so I said, how can I turn that down? To debate the president of the Italian Evolutionary Society. The place was Università La Sapienza. It's about 100,000 students, 1 mile north of the Colosseum. It's the oldest university in Italy. I was told that one of the reasons it was a standing room only is that's the first time Darwin had been critiqued publicly in that university. So as I was debating, I think I have a little circle to go around. Boncinelli, you see him down? Does he have a happy, is he happy? Has he a happy smile? He's glum. Why? He had not done his homework. He had done virtually no study of the intelligent design writings, Michael Behe. The entire thing was off the radar chart. He was just criticizing Genesis. But I wasn't referring to Genesis. I kept saying, boy, you really are interested in the Bible, aren't you? And so let's get back to the science. And I just said, what do we do with these molecular machines? And we just had far too much fun. And then the students, we had about 20 students that went to dinner with us. And they said, we've never heard this. And the guy that invited me, he said, I've heard it. That's why I brought you over. And so I said, tell them a little bit more, Dr. Woodward. So that was lots of fun. And then again, the shocks are coming right and left. I have another one. This is Thomas Nagel. If you haven't heard of him, you might even just lift him up in prayer. He's under persecution. He's an atheist. He just retired about 10 years ago. I think he's in his maybe late 70s or so. And so he began to research evidence for the design of the universe and life. And that's a dangerous thing to do if you're an atheist. Like, do not go. Do not open this little bottle of pills. So his book, published by Oxford Press, had this subtitle. Are you ready for it? Why the materialist neo-Darwinist conception of nature is almost certainly false. Whoa, them's fighting words. And so if you want to read a review, I wrote a review and I compared it with the change of mind that George Wald, a famous defender of Darwinism, just before he died, about 10 years before he died, changed his mind and said mind must precede matter. Instead of matter first and then mind evolves. And both of these guys came to this similar thought. Now, Nagel is proposing a really weird thing, and if you want to just see on our website, I have my 5-page article or 5-page review, and with some footnotes, you'll see this guy is still an atheist. But on the cover of the American Standard magazine, the Weekly Standard, he is appearing there on the cover with his gray suit, flames licking up, and red-hooded atheist Ku Klux Klan members burning him at the stake. That was on the cover. And basically, Andrew Sullivan said, why is he being persecuted? Because he's questioned the central radical concept that governs this whole worldview. So we're living in amazing times. This is like a Gamaliel, if you will, like the book of Acts. And that's someone not on our side, but he speaks publicly in defense of Michael Behe and Stephen Meyer, right there in the opening chapter of his book. It's an astounding 129-page book. So shocks are happening around us, but what about in general, what are we looking at in terms of the shocks of the evidence? So we're going to focus for the next about 30 minutes or 25 minutes on evidence for design and evidence for notice the word no, step-by-step continuum of change. Darwin's idea is that you could ratchet up step by tiny step. Okay, so think of that little ratchet mechanism. If you have a tire that blows out and you have to get your spare out and you're trying to crank the thing up, right? And if you look, the teeth are really tiny. You do each downstroke, it moves it up like just a hair. And that's the picture of Darwinian theory moving from one state of complexity to a higher state. Everybody got it. We've learned this in high school or college. And of course, many of us have come to question it. Not so much, I would say, I mean, there are biblical reasons for questioning it, but most overwhelmingly by the evidence. Lacking for that continuum of change. This is a key idea we're going to come back to in a minute. But notice, it's not just a negative, evidence for design. That's what the intelligent design movement is not, as the press often says it, creationism masquerading as science. Have you ever heard that? Creationism in a cheap tuxedo. I should go to one of these, secondhand clothing stores and buy a cheap tuxedo and wear it up here. No, that's not what intelligent design is. Intelligent design is the study of patterns in nature that are best explained as a result of intelligent design. Is there evidence? Well, we believe in the universe, just for starters, there is. So let's think again. Remember, we were talking about design patterns, so if you missed last night, you get to play the game. Are you ready? So, plausible or not? Remember plausible theory? That nature formed this or that, or not? All right, I think I have it ready to go. Man in the Mountain, it's in New Hampshire. Unfortunately, he suffered a little collapse around 2004, but this is what he looked like. And I think he's still on the New Hampshire plates, if I remember, kind of a memory. Okay, Man in the Mountain, if you looked up there at the cliff, it looks sort of like a head carved. There's a close-up. And it looks like, you can see the head and the chin and the nose and maybe an Adam's apple there. Okay, so could that have been formed by erosion? By the way, a clue, if you will run the other side of the mountain and look straight on, it doesn't look like a face at all. Okay, plausible theory, formed by erosion of various layers or not? Plausible, right? Okay, now the idea that wind or water or all kinds of erosion activities form these formations in another state, plausible theory or not, formed by erosion? Not likely. Altogether, not. Okay. Why? Because of precise representation of a detailed pattern. If you think of those as three-dimensional pixels, there are hundreds, maybe thousands or tens of thousands of pixels to get just the shape right. Now, do you know who designed it? No. I mean, I have to go to my Google search, encyclopedia, look, oh, that's the guy, crazy guy, worked for 20 years up there in South Dakota. Okay, so you can recognize design without knowing the designer, but you can positively discern design. That is what intelligent design is about. Another example, okay? Plausible theory or not. This is where I was playing with trying to get into a canister, a big kind of glass jar mounted up really pretty around Christmas time 3 years ago, and I was sneaking my hand in to try to sample some of the M&Ms before the grandkids arrived, and it spilled. Okay, I couldn't get the lid off. It would sprang off, and M&Ms everywhere. So Normie said, "What's the sound?" So she comes in with her cell phone, click, catches me in the act. That pattern was formed by chance as the M&Ms spilled. Plausible theory or not? Plausible, okay. And we looked closely in one corner of that spillage, and we saw this. I think it looks like Bad Boy. Plausible theory or not? Not, okay. How do we know? We just discern it. And I don't know, there's maybe 60, 80, 150 M&Ms there. But of course, I arranged them for fun. She did it a little close up, and the rest is history. And lastly, I think that Reverend Herb Lang was outside walking toward his car the other day, and he looked down in the dirt, and there the water from Hurricane Hermine, as it came barreling through the area, had revealed that there is this little erosion pattern in the rock underneath the church. Oh, yeah. Actually, this is the erosion pattern above the church. Okay. Yes, that's actually a picture of the Budapest building known as the Hungarian Parliament building. Okay? And that's clearly a knot, right? Formed by erosion. And this is the plate that also is down beneath our feet here. Plausible theory or not, formed by erosion, not. You recognize it as hieroglyphics. So I think we have our tune-up now. We're detecting design very well, and that's the concept. It's in the new book that just came out in July from Doug Axe. And I encourage you. We've sold out, I think, the 10 or so copies we had. You can get it for the same price at Amazon. So it's a fantastic read. It is revolutionary because it says even kids in elementary school have that design intuition. And he explains over and over and over in the book, very, very nicely explained, why Darwinian theory has no basis for wiping out or cutting off that intuition that you already have as a kid. And the end of the book is like a refrain, the children got it right. And I just love it. To think that all the children in this church and in every school around the world, without knowing it, are in effect scientists. They are doing common science. And so it's a day, a shocking in a way for me, day of revolutionary thinking. Now, if you look at the universe, even our own solar system, you see a pattern, do you not? This is what's called, and our Earth is, by the way, smack dab in the middle of it, the Goldilocks Zone. Not too hot, not too cold, just right. You may have heard of the Goldilocks Zone. That is what the astronomers call it. And as they look at other planets, there's, I think, over 2,000 of them that have been identified circling other stars. They are generally way away from the potential Goldilocks zone of those stars, those solar systems. Another example of design at the universal level, and that is gravity. Stars have to have gravity balanced with the electromagnetic force. How carefully? 1%, 10%? 1 in a million? No. 1 in 10 to the 40th. A number so big I had to do it cat a corner. Now that is remarkable. That's just the fine-tuned relationship between two factors. And if you go to the expansion rate of the whole universe, it's 1 at least in 10 to the 65th power, which is crazy. That's not my word. It's a word used by an astronomer. Let's roll the tape. And I think I may have given you the wrong, we're not doing the DNA, we're doing the Mark Davis. If you could roll that Mark Davis interview that I show to my Trinity class every year, so you get to enjoy this. And you may have to just touch on it with
fine-tuning is a remarkable statement that the universe is on a knife edge. It has been around for a long enough time to make us really wonder about how one could have set up initial conditions to be so finely tuned. The expansion rate was enormously high in the early universe, and the energy of the expansion had to be in perfect balance with the energy of the gravitational attraction. The kinetic and potential energies were finely balanced to amazing precision, like, for example, 1 part in 10 to the 60. That is 1 with 60 zeros. So that's a level of precision that is crazy.
Now you're talking about if it had been faster or slower, the expansion rate, by that 1 part in 10 to the 60th power.
The universe would be completely different. The universe today, the universe would either have ended many billions of years ago,
because it would have collapsed back in on itself.
It would have collapsed back in on itself.
Yeah.
Or instead, the universe would be in free expansion today, and the balance between the mass in the universe versus the critical value of the mass in the universe would be off by factors of billions.
So on the one side, galaxies never could have formed because they would have been the whole universe was dispersing too quickly. On the other side, galaxies never could have formed because they would have crunched back in on itself before it got to that stage.
Well, certainly life would never form. Everything would happen so quickly that it would be all over in an incredibly short time. So the universe is an amazingly fine-tuned environment, and physicists are very keen to understand how it came to be this way.
Okay, so this expansion rate is called by this astronomer crazy. That's his word. He's just being honest. And so we should, I think, agree. I can second that motion. And it draws your attention and asks you, why is it just that perfect? And now it's up to 1 out of 10 to the, are you ready for this? 240th power. So add another 180 zeros. That is astounding. I'd say that's a billion, zillion, zillion, gajillion times crazy, right? So, Hoyle, researching the weird properties of a carbon atom, something called the resonance level. You can Google that if you want to know what resonance level is. He says the sense of fine-tuning was so clear to him as not a Christian. He was originally an atheist. I think he turned pantheist near the end of his life. He says this, a common sense interpretation of the data, notice, of the data, suggests that a super intellect has monkeyed with physics as well as with chemistry and biology. In that same quote, if you follow it down, the end of the paragraph, he says, there are no blind forces in nature worth talking about. That, again, is almost like crazy that he saw that so clearly. So, what about biology? Dr. Gills and I had so much fun as we were working on our epigenetics book, and I didn't realize until he brought it to my attention, and then I did my own catch-up homework, that these DNA molecules are wrapped around take about 6 of these, and they make a circumference. They are twice wrapped around these spools. But the spools are not just storage devices. Those spools are actually software signaling systems that have little tails, and the tails are movable. It's like having a signal tower, but the tower can collapse against the DNA and act like a locking device also. God is a very good steward of the matter that he creates. And they can open up and then act as signaling devices to have the right molecules come in and work with the DNA. This is a level of complexity that is, remember the word that astronomer used? Crazy. Crazy. It's startling. It draws your attention. It's like the burning bush, right? God has these aha moments. I think God has planted many of the burning bushes right there in the Bible, of course, but they're right there in nature. They're right there being discovered by science. Denton was one of the earliest. Again, an agnostic when he wrote the book. I've heard he's become some kind of deist. I'm not sure, Aristotelian deist, whatever that means. But in his new book, by the way, he just came out with a new version of this book just 6 months ago, a 30th anniversary version. He added one word to the title. It's Evolution, Still a Theory in Crisis. I think that's kind of funny. But his original conclusion after analyzing 12 lines of evidence was this. And again, an agnostic who is basically shredding the theory of macroevolution. Darwinian theory of evolution is neither more nor less than the great cosmogenic myth of the 20th century. What he means by that is the creation myth. Now, one of the things I like to ask my evolutionary friends is, how do you maintain such faith in the teeth of hostile evidence? When the evidence is flowing in one direction, you would think that you would follow the evidence. But I don't have any way to manage the leaps of evidence, and you've heard that phrase before. Now, the atheist reacts strongly. Of course, Richard Dawkins has a rejoinder. He has a rejoinder for everything that we say, I think. And he says at this point, biology, of course, is the study of complicated things that give the appearance of having been designed for a purpose, but that's all exactly what he says. It's just an appearance. It's actually all explained by mutation and selection. So this is an illusion, and random mutations and natural selection are really doing all the crafting. And at that point, I feel like saying, could you give me just one example where in lab experiments or in the field observations, we've seen mutations cobble together a new gene or a new genetic system of any kind? There isn't. If someone says there is, they need to be helped to see the evidence. Okay, and I like to give 2 examples to show the incapacity of mutation. By the way, Darwinian theory I consider in a state of meltdown right now. Right now. Royal Society is holding a major meeting in London in November, and they are pulling together the leading scientists to see about a new path of explaining biology. And they're looking for a new paradigm. Several of the scientists have actually blurted out the word paradigm. You know what paradigm means? A new overarching theory to explain everything. And the old theory, they'd say, oh, clearly, it doesn't work anymore. Well, have your shot. Give it your best shot to see if nature can do this. I've seen in my own experience, I get text messages that are coming really not directly from Normandy, but they're a voice turned to text. You know, these little smartphones are not so smart sometimes, and they scramble the messages. So I like to give this as an example of my favorite text. I've got a whole series of these on a paper on our side of our fridge at home. But this is from Normandy sending me a text a couple years back. This is part 1. Anyway, meaning you are maybe on vibrate from your meeting. I'm coming home from Sam. Yes, I'm getting very. I was just wondering if your at home download on the. I only got it or not. At this point, I'm thinking, I got some idea of what she's saying, but I don't think I'm getting the whole picture. And again, that's what mutations are. They take one bit of data and they scramble it, they mix it, they change point mutations, changes a single letter in the DNA chain. So I'm thinking, I think we have a mutated voicemail that didn't get transcribed properly. But she's just getting warmed up. Are you ready for part 2? Okay. I left the baby dog out and she told me you were going to go home. There. So I thought you could be out of, Moro, okay, 5. At this point, I'm a little bit muddied in my understanding, okay? But I got entertained that our baby dog can now talk, okay? That's what happens to DNA when it gets mutated. And that's what Doug Axe, the author of this new book, Undeniable, his specialty is mapping exactly what mutations can and, most importantly, cannot do. If you just read any of those little, he has like in this chapter and maybe 3 chapters, a sliver of an experiment he did for 2 years. It's mind-boggling and exciting. It's incredible what he's finding. And now he's sharing it at a level that we can all understand it. So DNA, again, is part of the big story. Another way to test this, say, oh, mutations are doing everything just fine. This is a quote from an Oxford Press book, not too far back, published. There are presently no detailed Darwinian accounts of the evolution of any, notice the word any, biochemical or cellular system. Only a variety of wishful speculations, says Professor out in Colorado, Franklin Harold, in his book, The Ways of a Cell, Oxford Press. And I think we should make a T-shirt with that on it. I don't know if we may get permission from, you might not want to give permission, but anyway. Maybe we can make a T-shirt that has kind of like a digital thing that changes every 5 minutes. That would be really high tech, wouldn't it? And then this quote, that way we're not taking, and we're just, okay. PowerPoint T-shirts, a new idea in technology. Okay, so the key thing, and I'm just going to close with this in the next 7 minutes, okay? The abrupt fossil patterns are what are the most shocking to me and the most clearly against Darwinian theory. That bat was dug out when I was dug up from the quarry in Wyoming when I was about in the middle of my junior year in high school. And so it was about 1966. That, what they call Eocene bat, is dated 50 million years back, and I'm just using their dates. I'm not saying anything pro or con about the dating of these different levels. But that Eocene bat was a shocker to paleontologists. Why? It was the earliest full bat fossil, and it's identical to modern bats. So you would expect the earliest bat to be like proto, evolving, like, I'm phasing in. So instead of you have nothing, boop, modern bat, and then after that, does it change? Well, no, because it's the same structure as here today. I mean, you have a variety through the years of bat fossils. I'll give you another example. This is one of the earliest fossils of this kind of plant, and it is called a fern, obviously. Why do the earliest fern fossils look so modern and normal? I could give you 100 examples. Let me give you one more. You recognize that kind of critter? It's a spider. Yeah, it's a water spider. One of the earliest water spiders ever spotted in the fossil record. It looks like some of the species, running around the jungles in Latin America today. So what were we saying then? The number one fossil pattern, and this is actually brought out in the 1970s by Stephen Jay Gould of Harvard, wrote many, many articles defending Darwinian theory and coming up with a new explanation, is this. The dominant pattern is this. An animal appears abruptly, and they have a name for that, abrupt appearance. I think that's a pretty good name for an animal appearing abruptly. And then after that, do you think they change a lot? No, they don't change. They enter a pattern. I call it the stuck in the rut pattern, or stasis. That's the technical word. So what do we mean by that? That means if you follow the hypothetical tree, and I call this hypothetical or theoretical tree, you have a branching point, the common ancestry, they call that the node, that little Y down at the bottom. And then you have this continually tiny changes, and then you have the dots. So do we have evidence of those changes? No. Do we have evidence at the tips? Yes. The rest is inference. Now, I could go into more examples of the whole fossil record, but let me just go zooming down to the bottom where we see the Cambrian animals. And there's a whole film, Illustra Media has this film, Darwin's Dilemma, and then the book, Steve Meyer's book, is called Darwin's Doubt. So if you're writing notes, put down Darwin's Doubt. That's Meyer's book. I think we've sold out, but you can get it on Amazon. And then Darwin's Dilemma, I think that we may have a couple more. It's a fantastic, little bit over 1 hour film. It tells you the whole story of everything. With animated, these creatures that don't exist anymore are all animated. Don't you love animated creatures that are extinct? I like them, okay. So So this up in the Burgess Shale in Canada, Alberta, Canada, way about the 7,000 foot level, they found the most incredible cache of fossils dug up during World War I, but then analyzed only in the 1980s, 70s, but mostly in the 1980s. And this is an extinct slug, armored slug, with little knives projecting out of it, about 3 inches long. It appears suddenly, and then enters that period of no change, and that's called stasis. Very good. All right, you're fast learners. And then you see in this tier we have the upper Permian at the top, the Cambrian at the bottom. In the middle we have the pickle and cheese, all beef patty and special sauce layers. This is the Big Mac version of the fossil record. And notice down at the bottom, that's the lowest layer that has complex fossils, and that's where Darwin himself knew that in that area, that general part of the rock record, we have trilobites, brittle stars, ammonites. He said, I have no answer. I can give no explanation. This is a mystery. This is a dilemma. That's why, and he even used the word, I have doubt in this one area about my theory, because we don't see gradually changing predecessors. And then since then, we've found animals like this, the Opabenia, with 5 eyes on its head, a little kind of mouth that looks more like an elephant tusk in front of it, little Piper cub tail, and I tell my students, this animal is so ugly, only its mother could love it. And so this animal appears abruptly, and then guess what? Falls into that rut of no change and goes extinct. Why, if Darwinian theory is true, do we find this pattern everywhere, including Anomalocaris, this animal with 2 eyes, 2 grabber arms that look like they have a number of knife-like or actually fork-like appendages. It would grab that prey and pull it to the mouth on the underside and chomp away. This animal could grow to 7 feet in length. Okay, and the Anomalocaris appears abruptly, and then he doesn't change and goes extinct. Not very Darwinian. So the world is learning about this, but Stephen Meyer has said, sometimes they'll say, we do have animals below. They're these weird feather-like or frisbee-like creatures. And Steve Meyer says, that's just another explosion. These animals are not linked to the Cambrian animals, and then they go extinct. They appear and go extinct just as fast. They're weird, 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 but they do not solve the Cambrian mystery. So see Steve Meyer on the details. He's even said, that's just part of the story. What we have is a DNA explosion, because the Cambrian animals need about 120 million letters. They need a 120 megabyte hard drive to run their little critter animals and all the biochemistry. I'd say that's pretty cool, because random throw of dice, trying to form just 20 letters would be astronomical. Try 120 million letters lined up. Again, I don't think the atheist has any kind of advantage or leg up in this discussion. So before the trilobite exists, you need that 120 meg hard drive to run the trilobite. That's what's really exploding. And so I'm going to show you one of the examples that was in the Cambrian animals, and that's the building of a microtubule. It's like the interstate highway system, and these little tiny proteins, these are motorized proteins, aren't they cute? They're called kinesins. And they run up and down those fibers, and they literally carry on their back those huge loads, those globular building material blimps, as it were. And these animals, these little creatures are deployed on all animals, including those trilobites, because they do the job of bringing building materials to the exterior of a cell. Isn't that amazing? We are fearfully and wonderfully made. My wife once said, I think I feel a tickling down there. Maybe I'm feeling the activity of those kinesin. And maybe that's part of feeling tired in the morning. My kinesins have been working all night long. So, but seriously, biology is the most compelling evidence of design, and I'd say it's because we see everywhere staggering complexity. We see this at all levels. Including, I would say, the machines in the cell down to the DNA digital code. Again, digital information, a 4-letter alphabet. We have just in one cell, 3.1 billion letters of DNA. And I did the calculation, and you know what, David? 150 million of these models would be required for just the DNA in one cell. That's a lot of DNA. And then I multiply times the 60 trillion cells, and you have a really big number. That's how much DNA is in your whole body. And since they have the white deoxyribose, 6 billion sugar deoxyribose sugars, you are very sweet people. Okay, yeah, I had to say that. So, and of course, the whole picture of DNA is actually more complicated because recently discovered the three-dimensional packing arrangement of DNA within the nucleus adds another level of information. And then we see even the little signal systems. I mentioned that they're little chemical codes that attach themselves to those spools where the DNA is wound up. And I'll just close, but the complex nanomachines, those DNAs, form RNAs, and the RNAs build proteins, and those proteins make nanomachines. And in Michael Behe's story, life story of writing this book, this incredible book, is now coming out in the form of a movie. And I talked with Herb Lang just in the last 24 hours, discussed this very briefly with David and Nicole. I'll get the information to you. But Discovery Institute is willing, as we're showing the new revolutionary movie. It's never been shown. It's not even coming out for another month. But if we can work out the details to show that movie, Discovery Institute told me this week that they would fly, at their expense, they would fly Michael Behe down to be here in Tampa Bay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? I think it's unanimous. Okay, so I want to get to work. And again, I'm not saying that, I'm not 100%, can't declare it official, but we're working on having that as kind of maybe a follow-on. We would organize it. The church would provide the venue. But if you're excited, I'm excited, because then we could see the incredible story. And a German paleontologist has just gone public, who in 2009 read Behe's book. A little bit late, it's been out about 13 years at that point, and he's now changed his mind. He no longer is the bastion of Darwinism at this major German university. He is now quietly espousing the theory of intelligent design. Gunther Beckley is his name. He's gone public in this film. So I want to thank you for being a great audience. We all are excited to see what God is going to do. I want to thank my colleagues that spoke here, and back to you, David. Thank you.